Suffering doesn't stem from external events, but from our resistance to them. To escape the ongoing cycle of emotional pain, one must grasp a difficult but essential truth. Suffering is not caused by what happens, but by how we resist it. Many people live their whole lives without recognizing this, staying stuck in ongoing inner distress, repeatedly experiencing the same pain, unaware that they are the ones perpetuating their own suffering. Have you ever noticed this cycle in your own life? Comment 1 if you've realized you've been resisting reality. Comment 2 if you're just beginning to see how resistance creates suffering. Carl Jung, a leading figure in psychology, captured this idea in a profound quote: "What you resist persists." This is not merely a poetic phrase. It's a deep psychological and spiritual insight that can dramatically change one's life. Reflect on this carefully. When painful events occur, like job loss, the end of a relationship betrayal, or a major disappointment, emotional reactions such as sadness, anger, fear, or confusion are completely normal and valid responses. The key distinction is that suffering doesn't originate from the event itself, but from our mental struggle against it. It arises from the internal dialogue that insists, "This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. I can't handle this." It's this resistance, the unwillingness to accept reality, that turns pain into enduring agony. That is the real root of suffering. Human nature drives us to crave control. We want things to align with our desires, to avoid discomfort, and to live with predictability and certainty. Yet life doesn't conform to our expectations. It unfolds according to its own unpredictable rhythm. When life doesn't go as expected, our natural impulse is to resist, oppose, or deny it. We think, "This shouldn't have happened to me." That very moment of mental rejection of reality is when suffering truly begins. Consider a breakup. The initial pain of losing someone might last weeks or months, which is natural, but the enduring suffering that can last for years stems from refusal to accept it, from obsessively revisiting memories and insisting it should have ended differently. It's not the breakup itself that causes the ongoing pain. It's the inability to release what's already happened. Comment 1 if you have accepted and felt lighter. Comment 2 if you held on to the pain for years and found it hard to let go. This applies to all forms of loss, betrayal, failure, or rejection. What breaks you isn't the event itself, but the ongoing mental resistance to accepting what has already occurred. So, how can this harmful pattern be broken? The solution is found in a spiritual concept that, when truly embraced, can be life-changing radical acceptance. To be clear, acceptance is not the same as giving up. It doesn't imply approval or enjoyment of what occurred, nor does it deny the pain. Acceptance means ceasing the struggle with reality, stopping the futile expenditure of energy, fighting something that's already happened. Rather, that energy should be directed toward the one thing within your control: your response. Once genuine acceptance takes hold, a shift begins. The emotional weight starts to lessen, not because the pain disappears, but because you are no longer sustaining it through resistance. Picture someone who's been fired. Holding on to anger and the sense of injustice can keep them trapped in resentment for years, feeling victimized and bringing that pain into future work environments. But by accepting the event and asking, "What can I do with this?" they regain their power. They move from reactive living to intentional living, using the pain as a springboard for personal growth. That's the essence. It all depends on how you perceive things. Jung frequently emphasized the value of embracing every part of our experience, including the painful and difficult ones. When pain is accepted instead of resisted, it evolves into wisdom. One common error we all make at times is thinking our suffering is exceptional, that no one else could understand it, and that our pain is somehow more intense or unique compared to others. The truth is, pain is a universal human experience. Everyone goes through it. What distinguishes those who grow from those who remain trapped isn't the degree of suffering, but how they relate to it. People who resist pain end up suffering, while those who accept it are able to grow. If you genuinely seek healing and freedom, the first step is to stop fighting against life. Embrace what has occurred, acknowledge what cannot be altered, accept the present reality, and then redirect all your energy toward the things you can influence. Here's an often untold truth about finding freedom from suffering. The most surprising insight is that most of the suffering didn't originate from the event itself, but from how tightly you clung to the pain. A relationship ended and left you devastated for years, but the true cause of that prolonged suffering wasn't the breakup alone, but your unwillingness to release it. You were betrayed and couldn't move forward, not simply because of the betrayal, but because you held on to resentment. You missed an opportunity and felt immobilized in life, not just because of the lost chance, but because you kept obsessing over what might have been. Once you release resistance and stop battling reality, suffering starts to dissolve. While the pain may not vanish instantly, it loosens its hold. Eventually, the pain transforms into a valuable lesson rather than a permanent weight. Now we reach a deeper layer that few ever explore: how your unconscious mind keeps you stuck in suffering. Once you realize suffering comes from resistance, a new question emerges. If I understand this, why do I keep falling into the same emotional cycles repeatedly? This is the turning point. Discovering the hidden reason behind this repetition reveals a powerful truth. You possess much more control over your life than you previously believed. So stay tuned, because the next section will explore something truly impactful: how your mind has been unconsciously programmed to cling to suffering, and more importantly, what actions you can begin taking today to finally break free from that pattern. Let's start with a difficult reality. Your unconscious mind is wired to make you suffer repeatedly. If it feels like pain keeps reappearing in your life, as if by bad luck, it's time to confront a truth that most people are afraid to admit. The truth is, you're unintentionally recreating your own pain, not because you want to suffer, but because your subconscious programming keeps dragging you into the same emotional cycles over and over. Carl Jung expressed this clearly in one of his most profound and challenging insights. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What Jung was pointing out is that recurring pain isn't coincidental. It's not about the universe punishing you, nor is it due to life's cruelty. It doesn't mean you're doomed, unlucky, or cursed. The real reason lies within, deep in your subconscious, emotional, and mental patterns are being replayed automatically. You're reliving them, not by choice, but because they are familiar and deeply ingrained in your system. Your unconscious mind functions like a hidden software installed during childhood. If you were raised in an environment where love was tied to pain, abandonment was common, or safety was unreliable, those experiences formed your emotional framework. These beliefs were not chosen, they were embedded unconsciously. These patterns were taken and ingrained, and now they control your life. This isn't something people often talk about. Your unconscious mind isn't interested in your happiness. It's driven by familiarity. That's why, even when you consciously want to break free from pain, a deeper internal mechanism draws you back to the same types of people, scenarios, and emotional results. This isn't random. It's a recurring pattern. This is the hidden snare of the unconscious mind. Have you found yourself consistently drawn to relationships that bring pain? Have you had joyful or successful experiences only to sabotage or lose them? Do you repeatedly face similar problems despite promising that things will change? This isn't due to misfortune. It's your subconscious replaying what it recognizes. This is emotional self-sabotage in action. But why would anyone knowingly choose something harmful? The root lies in childhood conditioning. If you experience love as something tied to pain or abandonment, then as an adult, you'll unconsciously pursue relationships that replicate that dynamic. Not because you desire pain, but because that kind of love is what your nervous system knows. Familiarity feels safe even when it causes suffering due to the mind's distorted reasoning. If your early years involved rejection, humiliation, or neglect, you might now shy away from relationships, chances, or aspirations. A part of you fears experiencing that same hurt again. So you stay in your comfort zone, even if it keeps you trapped in pain. Here's the most painful truth. If you don't recognize these unconscious patterns, you will relive them indefinitely. You might label it fate and wonder, why do I keep choosing the same kinds of people? Why does nothing in my life seem to change? Why does everything always fall apart? But the reality is, it's not life fate or the universe conspiring against you. It's you unknowingly playing out a script that was embedded in your psyche long ago. So how can you interrupt this hidden cycle of suffering? The crucial first step is awareness. You can't change something you don't recognize. To truly end emotional pain, you must first acknowledge the unconscious patterns you've been living by and bring them into conscious awareness. Begin by reflecting on a few sincere and probing questions. What emotional themes dominate your life? Rejection, abandonment, betrayal, frustration, fear. What kinds of people or scenarios do you consistently attract? What narrative are you repeating about yourself and the nature of the world? When you answer honestly, a powerful shift begins. You start to see that the pain hasn't been imposed by the world, it's been generated within you. You've unknowingly projected it outward over and over, and that recognition is where true change begins. Ending this cycle of pain doesn't eliminate emotions like sadness, anger, or frustration. They're natural parts of life. What it does mean is that you won't be trapped by unconscious patterns that manipulate your life from behind the scenes. Once you become aware of the programming running beneath your awareness, you stop being ruled by it. While pain in life is inevitable, you can choose not to repeat or prolong it unconsciously. You can stop selecting pain without knowing you're doing so. From then forward, you begin to act with intention rather than simply reacting out of habit. The next section delves deeper, examining how the ego plays a key role in sustaining your suffering, and more importantly, how to weaken its grip before it continues undermining your well being. Understanding the ego's role in your pain is the turning point at which you begin to reclaim your personal power. Let's now discuss the ego. The ego thrives on your pain, it sustains it. If you're serious about breaking free from the emotional cycles that harm you, you must grasp this essential truth. Your ego is the greatest barrier to your healing. The ego is the internal voice persuading you that your pain is justified, that life is unjust, and that your happiness depends on others changing. It feeds you beliefs like, I'm always the victim, or nothing ever goes my way. Here's the harsh reality: the ego resists healing. If you genuinely let go of your pain, the ego would lose its sense of self. It relies on your suffering to survive. The ego feeds on conflict, blame, judgment, and the false idea that you are separate from others. It stirs up drama as a way to preserve its existence. It convinces you that your pain validates your perspective, that you are right and the world is wrong. It claims your resentment is justified and encourages you to cling to your emotional wounds. But once you recognize the ego for what it truly is, a defense mechanism, a facade, a tool for survival, you can start to dismantle its influence. You begin stepping into a more authentic version of yourself. This version of yourself doesn't depend on pain to feel alive, or on past repetitions to feel secure. True healing isn't about transforming into a different person. It's about reconnecting with who you were before external influences shaped your identity. Carl Jung famously stated, "The mind that creates the problem is not the same mind that can solve it." This quote reveals a deep truth. It exposes the very mechanism behind emotional suffering. The aspect of you responsible for your pain, the ego, is not the one that can bring about healing. The ego isn't merely an inner voice. It's the lens through which you view the world. Sadly, this very filter is what generated your emotional pain to begin with. If you attempt to heal while still operating from the ego, you end up reinforcing the very pain you're trying to free yourself from. So, how does the ego interfere with healing? It's sly. It won't openly say, keep suffering. Instead, it subtly offers seemingly valid justifications for holding on to your pain. It repeatedly brings up your betrayals, injustices, and abandonment, making sure those wounds stay fresh in your mind. These memories play on repeat, creating the illusion that dwelling on them empowers you in some way. In reality, this only keeps you stuck, caught in a repetitive cycle of pain and in the emotional confinement that the ego constructed. One of the ego's most harmful tactics is persuading you to fuse your identity with your suffering. It makes you believe that your pain defines you. Without awareness, you start to see yourself through the perspective of your old emotional injuries. You begin making statements like, I'm always betrayed, People always leave, or this always happens to me. Every time you repeat or dwell on those beliefs, you reinforce that identity more deeply within your mind. Without realizing it, you grow attached and loyal to your own suffering. The ego will additionally lead you to believe that the source of your pain is external. It insists that others are to blame, that life is indebted to you, and that your environment must shift before you can feel whole. This mindset is a perfect trap. If the solution lies outside, you never assume responsibility for your own healing. You stay stuck in a passive stance, waiting for apologies, fairness, or rescue. As long as you wait, you remain stagnant. You stop growing and evolving. The ego thrives on conflict, judgment, and unresolved pain. It keeps reopening your emotional wounds to keep them active. It flourishes when you fixate on your past mistakes or traumas. It traps you in recurring patterns of victimhood, bitterness, and blaming others. It persuades you to believe you have no control over your life. And this is how the victim mentality takes hold. One of the ego's most covert and damaging strategies is tying your sense of self to being a victim. When you adopt this mindset, you come to see every negative experience as caused by other people, bad luck, or destiny. Although blaming the outside world may seem like a form of self-defense, it actually robs you of your personal power. If you truly believe you lack agency, you'll never take action to transform your circumstances. That's precisely what the ego desires, to keep you feeling limited, helpless, and in pain. Do you ever catch your ego convincing you that life is unfair? Comment 1 if you've spotted your ego keeping you stuck in victimhood. Comment 2 if it still feels hard to recognize when it's happening. Here is the most difficult truth: no one is going to rescue you. Regardless of how much you cry, blame, or complain, help isn't coming from outside. You alone have the power to end this cycle. So how can you break down the ego's influence and reclaim authority over your life? The initial and most crucial step is understanding that you are not your ego. You are not your pain, your history, or the voice inside that insists you'll always be powerless. The ego thrives when you hold on to your pain. It feeds on it. However, once you stop giving your pain attention, the ego begins to fade and lose its strength. And in that very moment, something remarkable occurs. You begin to awaken. There are 3 impactful methods to start loosening the ego's hold on you. First, observe your internal dialogue. When the ego brings up old pain or whispers that life is unjust, pause. Don't respond, simply observe it with detachment. Recognize that this voice isn't who you are. It's a mental loop, a habitual script playing on repeat. The more you can watch it without attachment, the weaker its influence becomes. Second, stop nurturing the narrative of pain. Each time you relive how you were hurt or share your suffering, you strengthen the wound and grant it more power. Ask yourself whether the story uplifts or diminishes you. If it weakens you, release it. Stop reciting your pain. Third act. Contrary to the ego's desires, the ego wants you to react impulsively, stay bitter, and harbor resentment. But by choosing calm detachment and acceptance, you strip the ego of its power and reclaim your own. Once you clearly recognize the ego for what it is, its hold on you begins to weaken. You no longer feel compelled to cling to your suffering. You no longer depend on external approval. You cease to view yourself as a victim of your life situation. With that clarity, a powerful realization dawns. The pain didn't actually originate from the events themselves. The pain was genuine, but the narrative your ego created around it is what imprisoned you. Let us now consider one of the most profound truths about emotional healing. Pain cannot be eliminated by resisting it. It begins to fade only when we meet it differently. This is rarely taught to us. From childhood, we are encouraged to avoid pain entirely. Don't cry. Stay strong. Don't show weakness. As a result, we learn to suppress, deny, or escape it. Yet the reality is that resistance only strengthens it. The harder you attempt to suppress emotional suffering, the greater its hold becomes. Suppressed pain does not vanish. It hides deep within the mind, the body, and even one's actions. It manifests as chronic anxiety, unexplained anger, or emotional numbness. And the more it is ignored, the more deeply it embeds itself in the unconscious. Carl Jung captured this truth well when he stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." True healing cannot occur by ignoring pain. It requires complete, honest, and open confrontation. Pain behaves like a force. The more you push it away, the more it pushes back. This is why attempts to escape sadness, grief, or anger often intensify them. You tell yourself not to cry, to suppress emotion, or to remain unshaken. You distract yourself with work, social media, or constant activity to avoid stillness. Yet when the distractions stop, the pain resurfaces with greater intensity. You may then shift blame to others or to life itself. But projecting pain outward prevents you from turning inward where genuine healing begins. Pain itself is not what destroys us. It is our resistance to it that becomes unbearable. The key to breaking this cycle lies in acceptance. Stop fleeing from it. Allow yourself to feel deeply mindfully and without judgment. If sadness arises, allow yourself to cry. If anger surfaces, sit with it, not to act recklessly, but not to suppress it either. Simply observe the emotion witness. Notice its movement within the body. When you cease resisting and instead welcome pain as part of the human experience, its power begins to fade. The imagined monster within starts to diminish. And here lies one of the most beautiful truths: nothing endures forever. Every emotion, regardless of intensity, is temporary. Each wave of suffering will eventually pass if you allow it to. Resistance, however, prolongs the pain, extending it beyond necessity by carrying the story with you. Healing is not something that occurs in the distant future. It unfolds in the present moment, the instant you stop fleeing from yourself and begin embracing your entire being, wounds included. That is the beginning of true transformation. Carl Jung emphasized the significance of inner transformation, noting that one of its core truths is the recognition of impermanence. Nothing endures forever, neither joy nor pain. All things are in constant motion. Just as pleasure fades, so does suffering. It does not define you, nor is it eternal. Reflect on a past hardship. At that moment, it might have felt like an endless storm, leaving you hopeless, exhausted, and convinced you would never escape. Yet you did. You stand here now, wiser, more experienced, with fresh insights. You endured. The same truth applies to your current pain. It too will pass. The storm will subside, and the sun will rise again. How then can we radically accept pain rather than be consumed by it? How can we break free from being enslaved by our own suffering? There are practical steps available to begin right away. Powerful practices that help reclaim emotional freedom and awaken inner strength. The first is to stop judging pain. Do not label or overanalyze it. Do not ask, "Why am I feeling this way?" or "When will it end?" Instead, allow the feeling to exist without resistance, shame, or narrative. It is neither good nor bad. It is simply an experience passing through you. Nothing more. The second step is to observe the emotion within your body. When feelings of anxiety, anger, grief, or sorrow arise, resist the urge to let your mind create complex stories about life's unfairness or your brokenness. Instead, direct attention inward. Where do I feel this emotion? How does it manifest physically? Perhaps it is a tightness in the chest, a lump in the throat, trembling hands, or a knot in the stomach. Simply notice these sensations. Observe without attempting to correct or resist them. The third practice is to breathe through the pain. Rather than clenching your jaw, tightening your fists, or seeking distraction, simply take a deep breath and then another. Allow the breath to move through the emotion. Nothing more is required. You do not need to eliminate the pain. Your task is only to remain present with what exists. When you do this, something profound occurs. By ceasing resistance and embracing awareness, you see that pain holds no real power over you. It may still linger, but its grip weakens. You cease being a victim and instead become someone who moves through pain with strength, maturity, and grace. True power lies not in control or resistance, but in acceptance. Many people spend their whole lives avoiding pain, distracting themselves, steering clear of discomfort, or escaping through addictions, overwork, and denial. Yet the only true path to freedom from suffering is to confront it directly with full awareness and an open heart. When you stop resisting and instead allow yourself to fully feel something extraordinary unfolds, you realize pain was never your enemy. Suffering does not arrive to destroy you. It comes to awaken shape and transform you. With this realization, fear naturally begins to fade. Let us go further. Once resistance to pain ends, you can begin to use it not only for healing, but for growth in ways previously unimaginable. This marks the beginning of genuine transformation. You can convert pain into strength. This is the alchemy of healing. By now, it is clear that resisting pain only amplifies it, while avoidance deepens the wound and acceptance is the first step toward freedom. But beyond acceptance lies an even greater possibility to turn suffering itself into your most profound source of strength. Carl Jung grasped this truth deeply. He described alchemy not as the physical act of changing lead into gold, but as a psychological and spiritual process. The real alchemy takes place within us. The lead represents our pain, our deepest wounds, fears, and traumas. The gold is who we become when we embrace that pain and let it transform us: wisdom, strength, maturity, and compassion. These are the treasures that lie beyond suffering. Therefore, the true question is not, how can I escape suffering, but rather, how can I use suffering to become stronger, wiser, and freer? This is the hidden gift of pain, a call to awakening. Consider the strongest individuals you know, those with depth wisdom and quiet courage radiating through their presence. They did not reach that place by living easy lives or by avoiding hardship. They walked through fire, were broken open, and on the other side, they were reborn. Every painful experience presents a crossroads, a sacred invitation. You can allow it to shut you down, or you can allow it to open you up. You can permit it to define you, or you can choose to let it refine you. It is the decision to stop clinging to who you were and instead become someone entirely new, more conscious, more resilient, and more profoundly connected to life. Carl Jung described a profound experience known as the dark night of the soul, a stage where one confronts their deepest suffering. It is a time of severe emotional and spiritual upheaval, when it feels as though the very foundation of life is crumbling. You may feel at your breaking point, as though the burdens of existence are unbearable. The pain can seem overwhelming, even suffocating. Yet Jung did not view this as punishment. He considered it a sacred opportunity, an invitation to transformation, a test not of sheer strength, but of one's willingness to evolve. It is precisely in the moments when all seems lost, when you feel you cannot continue, that you stand at the threshold of your greatest breakthrough. Now imagine that instead of resisting the darkness, you pause to ask, what is this here to teach me? How can I use this pain not to collapse, but to rise? At that point, something profound occurs. You cease being a victim of circumstance and instead become the alchemist of your own life. You begin turning destruction into rebirth. From the ashes, a new self emerges, stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your truest nature. Each experience of loss, betrayal, heartbreak, or deep disappointment carries with it a kind of inner death. Yet what many fail to see is that this death is necessary. It marks the end of illusions, the collapse of false expectations, and the breaking down of identities that no longer support your growth. And with every such death comes the possibility of rebirth, a sacred opportunity to rebuild yourself on a foundation of deeper truth. If you reflect honestly on your life, you'll likely recognize that the most formative experiences were not your happiest ones. It was the struggles, the hardships, the moments when you were pushed to your limits and still found the strength to continue. That is the essence of transformation. Pain, in its rawest form, breaks you open. It dismantles the beliefs you once held about yourself, others, and the world. It compels you to face yourself and acknowledge what you've long avoided. Your shadows, your wounds, and the aspects of yourself you feared to see. Within this confrontation lies a gift, the opportunity to decide whether to stay stagnant or to grow, whether to let pain define you or refine you. So, how can suffering be transformed into strength? How can pain be turned into purpose? Here is a practical framework to start that journey. Step one is to shift your mindset. Pain is not a punishment, it is an initiation. Life does not present suffering to crush you, but rather to awaken you. Those who see it as unjust remain stuck in bitterness, while those who accept it as part of the journey emerge stronger. Each challenge you encounter is a chance to grow, learn, and evolve. Instead of asking, why me, start asking, what lesson is this here to teach me? Second, turn your story into a source of strength. Consider those who have endured deep suffering, yet transformed their pain into something positive. People who faced rejection and learned self-validation, those who were betrayed and grew to trust their intuition, and those who hit rock bottom, only to discover hidden inner power. Your story is uniquely yours, but how you choose to use it rests solely with you. Third, let pain become the fuel for your purpose. Pain has the power either to break you or to propel you forward. The choice is yours. If you've been hurt, resist resentment and rise from it. If life feels unjust, prove your ability to overcome. If you've endured loss, give that emptiness new meaning. The world's most successful people did not reach their heights by avoiding pain. They did so by using it as a launching pad to greatness. The final stage is transforming pain into wisdom. Once you've endured suffering and genuinely learned from it, something extraordinary occurs. You become unshakable. You no longer react to others' negativity, recognizing their projections are not yours to bear. Fear of pain dissolves, for you have faced it and survived. In fact, you emerge stronger, wiser, and more rooted in your truth. You evolve into someone with undeniable presence, radiating quiet strength because you have walked through darkness and discovered your own light. This is what Jung described as individuation, the sacred process of becoming your authentic self, free from masks, fear, or the need for external validation. At this stage, the emotional cycle of pain starts to dissolve. You cease defining yourself by past wounds. Instead of avoiding pain, you welcome it as a teacher, a guide, and a sign that you are ready for your next evolution. And then the realization comes, pain did not weaken you, it made you invincible. The choice is yours. You now know the truth. Pain is not to be escaped, but embraced, for it is the spark that ignites your greatest transformation. You face two options: remain trapped in suffering, resisting as a victim of life's hardships, or use that suffering as a springboard to grow stronger, wiser, and more unstoppable. Only one of these paths leads to freedom. So, which path will you take? If you choose to break the cycle and transform every hardship into a step toward growth, affirm it by writing, I transform my pain into power. For once you make that decision, truly owning your journey, nothing and no one can hold you back. Ultimately, it comes down to this: will you allow pain to dominate you, poison your thoughts, and deplete your spirit? Or will you choose What few dare to do, use it as a catalyst for transformation. As Jung wisely stated, true awakening only begins after you've hit rock bottom. Now that you grasp the truth about suffering, the power to change your life rests in your hands. Pain only dominates when you resist it, but the moment you stop running and embrace it, as your greatest teacher, everything transforms. You become the master of your destiny rather than its victim. If you've come this far, it means you're ready. Ready to change your life. Ready to stop being defined by suffering, and ready to begin writing a new story. Now, the choice is in your hands. Comment 1 if you're ready to transform pain into power. Comment 2 if you still feel resistance but want to start the journey. But this is only the beginning. Watch the next video. It will leave you speechless and guide you deeper into your journey of transformation. Click now, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss content that could truly change your life. See you in the next one.